"We're giving your college fund to your brother," my parents announced over dinner. "He needs it more." I just nodded and said, "Okay." 2 years later, they called begging me to co-sign their mortgage. I replied, "Go ask the kid you thought was worth paying for." The silence was deafening. I, 22 sat at the dinner table that Tuesday evening, fork halfway to my mouth, when my parents dropped the bomb that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of our relationship forever. My mother cleared her throat in that particular way she always did before delivering news she knew would sting. My father set down his glass with deliberate precision. They exchanged one of those married couple glances that communicate entire paragraphs without words. Then my mother informed me that they'd decided to redirect my college fund, the one my grandparents had started when I was born, the one I'd been told about since I could understand money, to my younger brother instead. The reasoning was simple, she explained. My brother had struggled in high school, barely graduating, and needed more support to find his footing. Meanwhile, I'd maintained a 4.0 GPA, earned a partial academic scholarship, and clearly had my life together. They were confident I'd figure things out on my own. He needed the help more than I did. It was the practical decision, the fair decision, the decision that made sense for the family as a whole. I remember the exact texture of the silence that followed. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly seemed deafening. My younger brother, 17 at the time, couldn't even look at me. He stared at his plate, shoulders hunched, playing the part of the reluctant beneficiary. But I'd seen the new gaming setup in his room. I'd heard him bragging to his friends about the car they'd promised him for graduation. This wasn't about need. This was about want, and about who they'd always loved more. I set my fork down carefully, took a sip of water, and told them okay. Just okay. Nothing more. My mother had prepared for tears, arguments, accusations. My father had his stern voice ready, the one he used when he wanted to shut down discussion. Neither was necessary. I simply acknowledged their decision and asked to be excused from the table. The confusion on their faces was almost worth it. Almost. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, doing math in my head. My scholarship covered tuition, but not housing, not books, not food, not the 1,000 other expenses that come with college. I had about $3,000 saved from my part-time job at the hardware store. My college fund had been sitting at around $47,000 the last time I checked, back when I still believed it was mine. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to disappear from their lives in every way that mattered, and I was going to build something they couldn't take credit for. I moved out 2 weeks later, the day after my high school graduation. Found a tiny studio apartment near campus, the kind of place where the bathroom door didn't quite close and the windows rattled when trucks drove by. Started my freshman year working 3 part-time jobs: the hardware store, weekend custodial shifts at the university, and late-night data entry for a medical billing company. I slept 4 hours a night if I was lucky. I ate ramen and rice and whatever free food I could find at campus events. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I didn't go home for Christmas. My mother called every few weeks at first, asking when I'd visit, telling me my brother missed me, saying I was being dramatic. I kept the conversations short and polite. Yes, classes were fine. Yes, I was eating enough. Yes, I'd try to visit soon. The lies came easily because I'd stopped caring whether they believed them. My brother texted occasionally, usually when he wanted something: advice on a paper, help with his college applications, someone to complain to about our parents. I responded with increasing delays until eventually I stopped responding at all. He'd made his choice when he accepted that money without a word of protest. We both knew he could have spoken up. He chose not to. The thing about burning everything down is that it's remarkably clarifying. Without the safety net of family support, every decision carried weight. I couldn't afford to fail a class. I'd lose my scholarship. I couldn't afford to get sick. I had no insurance. I couldn't afford to take a day off. The bills wouldn't pay themselves. That pressure, that constant awareness of the tightrope I was walking, turned me into someone I barely recognized. Someone harder. Someone focused. By sophomore year, I'd landed an internship with a mid-sized marketing agency. The pay was slightly better than my other jobs, and it was in my field. I dropped the custodial work and cut my hours at the hardware store. By junior year, the agency offered me a junior account coordinator position, part-time during school, with a promise of full-time after graduation. I took it. My grades slipped slightly, 3.87 instead of 4.0, but I was building something real. Something mine. I graduated on a Saturday in May with a job offer already signed, a decent salary, and exactly 0 family members in the audience. My mother had called 2 weeks prior, asking about tickets, assuming they were invited. I told her the ceremony was closed to guests due to COVID restrictions. Another lie that came too easily. The marketing agency became my launching pad. I learned everything I could, worked every hour they'd give me, and made myself indispensable. Within a year, I'd been promoted twice. Within 2 years, I'd been headhunted by a larger firm in the city with a salary that would have seemed fictional to my 18-year-old self. I took the job, moved to a decent apartment, and for the first time since that dinner table conversation, I could breathe without calculating the cost. I was 22 and completely financially independent. No debt, no help, no family. My parents had no idea about any of this. As far as they knew from our increasingly rare phone calls, I was scraping by, working retail, still figuring things out. I never corrected them. Let them think I was struggling. Let them believe their decision had been vindicated, that I was managing, but just barely, exactly as they'd predicted. My brother, meanwhile, had blown through most of the college fund in 3 semesters at a state school, partying more than studying, before dropping out to find himself. Last I'd heard through the family grapevine, an aunt who still tried to maintain bridges, he was living at home, working sporadically, talking about maybe going back to school someday. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I didn't take pleasure in it the way I'd imagined I might. Mostly I just felt nothing. They'd become strangers to me, characters in a story I'd stopped reading. Then, 2 years after I graduated, my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother's number. I almost didn't answer. I was in a meeting in 15 minutes, going over quarterly projections with a client. But something made me pick up. Her voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Strained. Nervous. She asked how I was doing, really doing, and there was genuine concern there that felt decades too late. I gave her my standard responses. Fine. Busy. Working. She asked about my apartment, my job, my life, with a specificity that felt like reconnaissance. Then she got to the point. They were in trouble. The housing market had shifted, their adjustable rate mortgage had ballooned, and they were looking at refinancing. But their credit had taken hits. Medical bills from my father's minor surgery, some bad decisions with credit cards, the usual middle-class financial deterioration that happens when people live slightly beyond their means for years. They needed a co-signer with good credit and stable income to secure better terms. She asked if I consider helping them. It would just be a formality, she assured me. They'd never missed a payment on anything. This was just about getting a better interest rate. It wouldn't cost me anything, wouldn't affect me at all. It was what families did for each other. I stood at my office window, looking out over the city, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a vast, empty neutrality. I asked her why they didn't ask my brother to co-sign. After all, they'd invested so much in his future. Surely he was in a position to help now. The silence stretched out between us like a chasm. She tried to recover, stumbling through an explanation about how my brother was still getting established, still finding his way, still dealing with some setbacks. It wouldn't be fair to burden him with this kind of responsibility when he was struggling. The parallel was so perfect it almost made me laugh. I told her I understood completely. I told her that just as they decided I was capable of handling my own challenges without their support, I was confident they were capable of handling theirs. I suggested they go ask the kid they thought was worth paying for. I was sure he'd figure something out. After all, wasn't that what they'd always believed about me? My mother tried to interrupt, to explain, to justify. I could hear my father saying something in the background, his voice raised. But I was done listening. I told her I had a meeting to get to and ended the call. The silence afterward was deafening, but it was mine. Update 1. The call started coming daily after that. My mother, my father, sometimes both of them on speakerphone, trying different approaches. First came the guilt. How could I abandon them in their time of need, after everything they'd done for me, after all the years they'd raised me and supported me? I listened to these messages while reviewing campaign analytics, deleting them without response. Then came the justifications. They'd truly believed I was capable and independent. They'd been trying to teach me self-reliance. They'd always known I'd succeed without help. These messages were longer, more desperate, filled with rewritten history where their decision had been some kind of tough love parenting strategy rather than simple favoritism. I deleted these too. Finally came the bargaining. They'd pay me back for co-signing somehow. They'd make it up to me. They'd find another way if I just gave them some time to figure things out. Could I at least talk to them? Could we meet for dinner? Could I please just call them back? I responded exactly once, via text, 2 weeks after the initial call. I told them I wished them the best in resolving their situation, but I wouldn't be participating in it. I suggested they contact a financial advisor for guidance on their options. Then I blocked their numbers. My brother tried next. A long, rambling text message that arrived at 2 in the morning, clearly written after several drinks. He was sorry, he said. He'd always felt guilty about the college fund. He'd tried to tell them it wasn't fair. He knew I probably hated him. But our parents were really struggling, and he couldn't help them. And couldn't I please just talk to them? For him? For the family we used to be? I read it 3 times, looking for any moment in the past 4 years where he'd actually tried to reach out, actually attempted to bridge the gap he claimed to feel guilty about. I found none. His guilt was convenient now, activated only when he needed something from me. I replied with a single sentence. I told him that families support each other when it matters, not just when it's convenient, and that he should have thought about that 4 years ago. He didn't text back. Through my aunt, who'd become an unexpected ally, apparently disgusted with my parents' choices once she'd learned the full story, I heard the fallout. My parents were scrambling, trying to find co-signers among friends and extended family. The story was getting out. People were asking questions. Why wouldn't their own son help them? What had happened? My parents apparently tried to paint me as ungrateful, vindictive, cruel. But my aunt, bless her, had been talking to people. She'd been telling them about the college fund, about how I'd put myself through school, about how I'd been effectively cut off at 18. The narrative my parents tried to spin found no purchase. They eventually found a different solution to their mortgage crisis, selling the house and downsizing to something smaller, something they could afford. It wasn't the catastrophic outcome they'd feared, but it was a blow to their pride, a visible sign of downward mobility in a social circle where appearances mattered. My brother moved out of necessity, finding a roommate situation across town. My aunt told me he'd been forced to get a full-time job at a warehouse, finally confronting the reality that his parents couldn't support him forever. I felt nothing about any of this. No triumph, no vindication, just a distant acknowledgement that consequences existed, that choices mattered, that the universe occasionally balanced its books. Update 2. 6 months after the co-signing call, I got engaged. Her name was Sarah, and she was everything I'd never thought I deserved. Kind, brilliant, successful in her own right as a civil engineer, and completely unbothered by my complicated family situation. She'd grown up with her own dysfunction and understood that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. We'd met through work, tangentially. Her firm had contracted my agency for a marketing campaign, and the relationship had developed slowly, carefully, with the kind of intentionality that comes from 2 people who've learned not to take good things for granted. I didn't tell my family about the engagement. I didn't tell them about the proposal in the park where we'd had our first date, or the ring I'd saved for months to afford, or the way she'd cried and laughed and said yes before I'd even finished asking. My aunt found out through social media. Sarah had posted photos, tagged me, made it Facebook official in the way that our generation does. My aunt called immediately, congratulations, and concern mixing in her voice. She asked if I was going to tell my parents. I told her she was welcome to share the news if she wanted, but I wouldn't be making any special announcements. She did share it, apparently. My mother called from a number I hadn't blocked, a neighbor's phone, maybe, or a new cell. She left a voicemail that I listened to once, standing in my kitchen, trying to identify any emotion in my chest besides the familiar numbness. She was happy for me, she said. She wanted to meet Sarah. She wanted to be part of the wedding planning. She knew things had been difficult between us, but this was a new chapter, a fresh start. Couldn't we put the past behind us for something this important? The audacity of it was almost impressive. I saved the voicemail, not out of sentimentality but as evidence, a reminder that some people never really change. They just get better at packaging their self-interest as concern. Sarah and I planned a small wedding. 60 people, mostly friends, some of her family, my aunt and uncle. We rented a small venue upstate, hired a photographer, wrote our own vows. It was perfect because it was ours, untainted by obligation or performance. 3 weeks before the wedding, my father showed up at my office. I don't know how he found out where I worked, probably my aunt, in a misguided attempt at reconciliation. But there he was in the lobby, looking older than I remembered, asking the receptionist if he could speak with me. She called my extension, confused, asking if I knew a man claiming to be my father. I told her I'd be right down. He looked diminished somehow, standing in the corporate lobby in his weekend clothes, out of place among the business casual and designer suits. We went outside, found a bench away from the building entrance. He told me he was sorry, not for the college fund specifically, but for how things had gone, for the distance between us, for not understanding how hurt I'd been. He said he wanted to be at the wedding. He said my mother wanted to be there too. They wanted to meet Sarah, to be part of my life moving forward. I asked him a single question. I asked if he understood why I'd walked away. He struggled with it, starting and stopping several sentences, trying to find words that would thread the needle between acknowledgement and excuse. He said they'd made a difficult decision with the information they had. He said they truly believed I was capable of handling things on my own. He said they'd never meant to hurt me. Notice what was missing. He never said they were wrong. He never said they'd made a mistake. He never acknowledged that their decision had been fundamentally about favoritism disguised as pragmatism. I told him I appreciated him coming by, but that my answer hadn't changed. I'd built a life without them, and I was getting married in that life. They weren't part of it anymore, and that was a choice they'd made 4 years ago whether they realized it or not. He tried to argue that I was being unfair, that I was punishing them forever for one decision, that families forgave each other. I stood up, told him I had work to get back to, and walked away. I didn't look back to see if he was still sitting there. Update 3. The wedding was beautiful. Sarah looked like something out of a dream in a simple dress she'd found at a boutique in the city. My aunt cried during the ceremony. My uncle gave a toast about found families and the relationships we choose. Sarah's father welcomed me with a warmth that felt foreign and overwhelming. I didn't think about my parents during the ceremony. I didn't wonder if they were thinking about me. I didn't feel the absence of something. I felt the presence of what I'd built, the people who'd chosen to show up, the future that stretched out ahead of me untethered to the past. We honeymooned in Portugal, 2 weeks of late dinners and coastal walks, and the kind of rest that only comes when you're truly at peace. I didn't check my phone much. I didn't think about work. I certainly didn't think about family drama. When we got back, there was a letter waiting in our mailbox. My mother's handwriting on the envelope, our new address somehow obtained. Sarah asked if I wanted her to open it. I told her to throw it away unopened. She did, without question, and I loved her more for not pushing. Life continued. We settled into our marriage, into the rhythm of 2 careers and 1 shared life. I got another promotion. Sarah's firm made her a junior partner. We started talking about buying a house, maybe getting a dog, maybe eventually thinking about kids. My parents became a story I told rarely, a brief explanation when someone asked about my family. Sarah knew the full history, but she never pressed me to reconcile. She understood that some bridges burn for good reasons, and that healing doesn't always mean going back. I ran into my brother accidentally about a year after the wedding, in a coffee shop near my office. He looked different, thinner, tired, but also somehow more substantial. Less of the aimless kid, more of an adult starting to take shape. We had an awkward conversation by the counter. He congratulated me on the wedding, said he'd seen photos my aunt had shared. He told me he'd enrolled back in community college, part-time, while working full-time. He was studying accounting, something practical, something with clear career paths. He told me he understood why I'd cut them all off. He said he'd been a coward for not speaking up about the college fund. He said he was sorry, and I could hear that he actually meant it. I told him I was glad he was getting his life together. I told him I didn't hate him, but I also couldn't have a relationship with him while he was still enmeshed with our parents. That if he wanted to reach out someday, after he'd built some independence, I'd be open to talking. He nodded, said that was fair, and we parted ways. I don't know if he'll ever actually reach out. I don't know if enough time will pass, enough growth will happen, enough distance will develop between him and our parents for a real conversation to be possible. Maybe someday. Maybe never. I'm okay with either outcome. What I learned through all of this is that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just living well, building something good, and refusing to let the people who hurt you have access to what you've created. It's setting a boundary and maintaining it, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. My parents wanted me to co-sign their mortgage because they finally realized I'd succeeded despite them, not because of them. They wanted to be at my wedding because they wanted to claim some credit for who I'd become. They wanted back in my life because absence made them look bad, not because they actually understood what they'd lost. And I said no. Not dramatically, not with grand speeches or final confrontations. Just quietly, firmly, with the same matter-of-fact acceptance I'd shown at that dinner table for years earlier. The difference was that when I said okay then, I was agreeing to their terms. When I said no now, I was enforcing my own. That silence after I told my mother to ask the kid they thought was worth paying for, that deafening silence, wasn't just their shock. It was the sound of consequences arriving, of reality contradicting their narrative, of the son they dismissed being the only one who'd actually built something worth having. And living well, it turns out, is more than enough revenge. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.